Hello and welcome to Planning and Assessment, the third episode as part of our Red Team Fundamentals mini-series. In today's video, we'll be building upon the previous two, and we'll be discussing how to plan a Red Team assessment, taking a look at how to conduct scoping, and better understand the concepts such as rules of engagement and its importance. All of today's content will be supplemented with a practical look at some realistic examples, both a scoping document which is made by us at HackerForce, and then we'll also take a look at the rules of engagement document provided by redteam.guide. Now, this is the final theoretical episode, before we dive into the practical components of Red Team. And in the next video, we'll be taking a look at how to set up a command and control infrastructure. Then we'll get into reconnaissance, phishing, privilege escalation, and the list goes on. So please bear with us for this last video. And again, I can't stress the importance of how much it is important, to understand the theoretical components as much as the practical components of red teaming. My name is Irvin Asmil-Tennis, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and feel free to join our Discord server to keep up to date with the latest content and some very exciting stuff we've got coming up at HackerForce. Every red team assessment begins with the development of an assessment plan. And this assessment plan is what defines the client wishes to evaluate. And during the stage of planning, you will participate in meetings and conversations with your client and other relevant stakeholders to better understand their organization, their specific requirements, any questions they may have, and ultimately their end goals. Now remember, it is you and your red team who are responsible for addressing these inquiries and delivering the outcomes that align with the client's expectations. So at its core, every assessment plan needs to establish and verify the scope and objectives of the assessment and also the rules of engagement of the assessment. And now we'll get into the two shortly, but I kind of want to start off with a little history lesson at what can go wrong if an assessment plan is not made prior. So many years back, an incident occurred where two coal fire security consultants were arrested during a physical red team operation on a government body. And now, despite being authorized to do so, the local law enforcement for that area were not informed, and thus they were called out to the area, and the two consultants ended up being apprehended at gunpoint and charged with burglary. And I'm not meant to, terrify you from the whole concept of red teaming, but, hopefully this should give some light why a proper assessment plan is essential. So what are the lessons learned for coal fire? They could have ensured that all relevant stakeholders, including the law enforcement, and building personnel for where they were conducting their activities were informed and have formally signed and approved the knowledge of the assessment. And this is just one example of what can go wrong, but thankfully there were no casualties. But again, this should shed some light on its importance. So the scope and objectives, and in the previous video, we discussed the meaning of the scope. And if you remember, the scope is the document that outlines clearly what the client wishes to evaluate. Now, diving a little bit more into it, at a minimum, the scope should address the permitted and prohibited actions, assets that may be targeted and those that may not, and last but not least, the objectives that are required to fulfill the organization's assessment criteria. And although different organizations all have varying scopes, and these scopes will differ according to the type of assessment being conducted, these 3 points should serve as a baseline for planning and scoping the entire document and defining the objectives. So to provide some more context over this, the table you can see below illustrates the typical network-based structure that delineates both the authorized and unauthorized activities across several common categories. So you've got the network category, you've got the applications category, you've also got the tactics and techniques category. Don't really focus on that right now. What we'll focus on is network, which you can see all of the IP addresses within the 10.0.8.0 IP range are perfectly testable. But any IP address in the out of scope section there, the 10.0.9.0 range is absolutely prohibited. and even attempting to ping an IP address within that range can seriously get us in a lot of trouble. The same can really be said about the applications category. VPN.HackerForce.io and admin.HackerForce.io is absolutely accessible, so you can conduct all your activities on it. But then customer.HackerForces.io, be it because of a critical service or something, is not accessible by any means. Now, as for the tactics and techniques, whilst they're not specifically the assets that are in scope, they outline the TTPs for which the red team is allowed to conduct and for which the red team is prohibited to do so. So in this case, T1566.001 technique, which is spear phishing attachment, is permitted. Spearfish targeted accounts can be phished using attachments. But if you look there in the out of scope column, you've got a tactic of exfiltration, which is TA0010. So any exfiltration of data, be it from an in-scope asset or not, is not allowed. And the same really can be said about TA0040, which is impact, which basically means that no manipulation, interruption, or destruction of systems or data is permitted. So although the table was quite informative, I've quickly made up a document that outlines the typical structure of what a scoping document will look like. Now, if we scroll down here a little, in a standard scoping document, you'll typically have a table of contents, which outlines every single section here as part of the document. But typically, you'll see the engagement objective section, the in-scope assets, detailing every single subsection here with the asset that is in scope, and the same can be said for the out of scope assets. So for the engagement objectives, this section is typically at a high level, describing the objectives for the red team that the organization wants evaluating. So here, you have evaluate the blue team's ability to detect, respond to and remediate advanced threats in real time, assess the effectiveness and coverage of deployed defensive technologies, and also achieve domain administrator privileges on DC1 domain controller. So by using these engagement objectives as red team operators, we can start kind of building a mental model using a framework or methodology for the steps that we will take to meet these objectives. So hopefully that should be clear. If we scroll down here a little, we have a section for the in-scope assets, and essentially these are all the outlined assets that are within scope, as it should be clear. You've got your external IP range that is accessible, you've got your internal IP range, the web applications that are accessible, the phishing targets, all employees can be phished, excluding executive leadership, which we'll get into shortly, and also your cloud infrastructure. So I hope this should be clear, and if you understand networking, these IP ranges should make sense, but the thing that I kind of want to focus on is this little subsection here that details or highlights the specific action, which in this case, denial of service attacks are not permitted when assessing this IP range. Going down here a little as well, for the phishing attacks, phishing is allowed for all employees, excluding executive leadership, but you may only use approved pretext and phishing templates. Same for cloud infrastructure for this AWS account. Testing is limited to predefined services, so you'd get those from your red team lead, and the brute force of IAM roles is not permitted. So if you scroll down here a little more, we have the out of scope asset section, and essentially it is the exact same for the in scope asset section. but it details all the assets that are out of scope. So here, you can see the production email infrastructure is, prohibited from assessing, and it gives a little description why. So it's operationally critical, and it can cause a risk of disruption. And, kind of going back up here, remember we have the phishing target section here. So every single employee can be phished, excluding executive leadership. And the executive leadership here includes the CEO, the CFO, and the CISO email accounts and phone numbers. And going down here a little more, third-party services. These are all the services that are not owned by the client ownership. So if we were to assess these services, we would essentially be assessing or quote hacking, a third-party client that's not even associated with our client. Associated in the sense that they are their third-party services, but not associated with us. And the physical location here, no sort of physical attack is permitted. So you can't go up to site and start picking the locks. That's not how it works. And data extraction, the extraction, exfiltration, or manipulation of any sensitive or production data is strictly prohibited. And this includes any PII information, any financial records, customer or employee data, intellectual property, any other files that are not explicitly authorized for simulation. Now, this message here, I kind of want to highlight on as well. If proof of access is required, say you are assessing a service or a system and you manage to get on that system and you want to prove that, that information that is there can be assessed or accessed, directory listings or file hashes may be used in lieu of full data extraction. So when you are assessing that system or service, and you manage to get on it or hack it, rather than actually listing the contents of the files there, maybe you can use a quick for loop to, list the file hashes of every single file within that directory or whatever it may be, database, whatever, rather than actually viewing the content that is there. So we get to the rules of engagement. And this is typically a document that the red team lead will take care of, at writing and at conversations with the client. But essentially, it outlines the guidelines and constraints that govern the execution of a red team assessment. So where the scope defines what is being tested, the specific systems, network, and applications, the rules of engagement outline the how the testing will be conducting, including the responsibilities, the relationships, methodologies, timelines, and any legal considerations. Now, where the scope is not really, where the scope is not strictly legally binding, the rules of engagement document is, so before an assessment takes place, both parties, so that's the client and the red team, must mutually agree to it and sign it off. And failure to adhere to the scope and the rules of engagement, will lead to significant legal repercussions and, not only the halting of the assessment, but also damage to reputation for the red team and other significant problems. So to briefly cover, what the rules of engagement document addresses, it includes an overview of the authorized and unauthorized activities for the red team. It must detail their specific permissions, the in-scope assets and constraints, which is the out-of-scope assets. It should also include the activities for which the red team will conduct, and this includes reconnaissance, network traversal, elevation of privileges, and all of this should be substituted with a list of tools for which the red team will use. Now, most importantly, the operational guidelines detail how the red team operations are conducted. It all must be ensured that all actions remain predictable and reversible. and this minimizes the risk of unforeseen repercussions. And in addition to that, the rules of engagement document must also address the deconfliction procedures, detailing the specific protocols for identifying and resolving potential conflicts for genuine security incidents and the red team's operations. Last but not least, we've got the identification of and reference to pertinent legal and regulatory requirements that are applicable to the red team assessment. But most of these components that you see as part of the rules of engagement, will be written by the red team lead, and they're not really strictly that relevant to us at this time. So here we have the rules of engagement document. This document is from redteam.guide. And essentially, we'll briefly touch upon the contents of this document without going too much into detail. But, firstly here you've got your executive summary. Essentially it defines, with a reference to an appendix, the objectives of the assessment, any explicit restrictions of the assessment, the authorized target space, the activities for which the red team will perform. And scrolling down here a little further, you'll also find the table of contents. We've seen that in the scoping document. And then you've got your rules of engagement introduction, the purpose of the assessment, any applicable standards to the assessment, the scope, and the support agreement between the red team and the client. Most of the content here will be tailored specifically for your client, but scrolling down here a little further, you've got your requirements, restrictions, and authority for which the red team will meet, so maybe providing the appropriate support and input for planning the engagement. We previously said that both the red team and the client will engage in conversations at the start of the video, and do not conduct any denial of service attacks except as explicitly approved. So in the scoping document we previously saw this, but then you also have your resolution of issues / points of contact, so in case there is an issue, maybe an asset is brought down, or maybe some data is extracted from a source where it shouldn't have been. You've got your points of contacts for whom will be contacted, but the same can apply for the client. The client can see, to contact the red team lead, Mr. James Tuberville. You can contact on this number here, and there's the email account. And after all of this has been outlined and every single detail has been included as part of the rules of engagement, you've got your approval section. So both the red team lead will sign off, the client will sign off, and only then will the assessment commence. Now, we've only just touched upon this document, and it's not really that necessary for you as a red team operator to understand this document fully. You only really need to know how to navigate such document, understand the scope, understand the objectives, and it will be the red team lead who, writes up this document and communicates with the client. So as an operator, understanding this document, understanding its importance and how to navigate it is really what you need to know. Now, I can cover a bit more about this document should you want to. Just leave a comment down in the comment section, and I'll create a more detailed video covering this document in more depth. And that is it for the theoretical side of red teaming. So hopefully by now you should kind of understand what red teaming is, its origins, the types of red team assessments there are, also its methodologies and frameworks. And by now, by the end of this video, hopefully you should kind of start seeing how a red team assessment can be planned. So in the next video, we'll be taking a look at the types of command and control servers. We'll also be setting up a command and control server and getting to know a command and control server named Sliver, getting to use it, generating some implants, taking a look at the various communication protocols for those implants, and overall kind of building a foundation for which upon all or major red team assessments are built upon. It's been your host Irvin Asmil Tennis, and I will see you in the next one.